Hi, welcome everyone. This is Scriptcamp's rewrite intro class that's going to go over the basics of the upcoming rewrite course, which goes for 4 weeks and is intended to take you from a completed draft to a more improved, more polished draft, which is, many would say, the only option. It's like you rarely are going to be rewriting something again and again and having it get worse. I mean, that can indeed happen, and you have to be aware of, like, am I pushing this in the right or the wrong direction? And that's why it's all just very important to get your ducks in a row and all your objectives in place at the very beginning of the process. And we're going to approach this in just a really more methodical way than you may be used to. It's, I think, a lot of people's first instinct to just open up a script that is done and just immediately start tinkering with it and moving things around. And oh, we need video for the Discord stream. 1 second. Sorry about that. Why have I been forgetting that lately? Let's click this. But while I'm doing that, let me say, so a lot of people's first assumption is that they should just open a script that is completed and just go through it and start changing lines and changing things that don't suit them anymore and changing, like, editing on the fly without a coherent plan behind what they're doing. When you really, it's going to benefit you the most to approach this in a much more planned way. Because it's easier for you to keep yourself on track and also just distinctify between these different drafts rather than having this be all one constantly evolving mega draft. You have, like, this is draft 1, and I have saved that, completely discrete, self-contained version of the script, and now I'm moving on to draft 2, which will be, have many elements of draft 1, but does not necessarily need to feel like the same document, and you're going to just, you're going to put together a really comprehensive roadmap for changing that story. So these are our first slides on just troubleshooting audio. If you have not checked your mute icon, it's in the bottom left corner of the Discord window. That's that little white microphone. So you may have to click that and just keep that on unless we have you called on, or else we sometimes will get, like, noise disturbance. So Scriptcamp is a screenwriting community that's focused on helping you go from, with most of our boot camps are focused on taking you from idea to first completed draft. This is the only one of our boot camps that actually focuses on the idea of taking a completed draft and moving it to more polished script. So we have lots of free events and classes and workshops, and some paid ones as well. So the classes to follow in this course will be available to members, or if you want to buy the course on its own, you can do so through our website, scriptcamp.net. This is just a little about me, but I've been over this many times before. I've been a pro working Hollywood writer since 2017, have a script set up at a major production company in town now, and teach the boot camps and weekly writers lab. So this one is a 4-week class, like I mentioned before. Let's look at the schedule. Week 0 is kind of how we're looking at this, the broadest possible bird's eye view of this process, and looking at every step and making sure we just understand what actually goes into a rewrite and how do we plan for it. We can also talk about how to analyze scripts and how to actually be giving and receiving feedback, which is a huge part of being a screenwriter and just one of the major skills to keep in mind and to work on. You don't think of this as something that you might need to work on, but many people actually do. What to read for, how to be a better reader, how to break down and analyze structure and, like, assess where the issues are in not only other people's scripts but also your own. So part of being a rewriter is, well, I should say part of being a writer is being a rewriter, just because the first draft of something is almost never going to be the final version that goes forward. Scripts are constantly taken apart and having new ingredients pushed into them and being reassembled, and there's just many cooks in the kitchen that are not you. And once you have signed a deal with once you've sold a script, it no longer belongs to you. And anyone who has bought it and now owns they own the property, they can do pretty much whatever they want with it. They are just using you as the most convenient chef to make those adjustments. The second that you start not really working out or disagreeing with them too much, they will fire you off your own movie and hire someone else to rewrite it more. Even if you do a good job, you can be fired and rewritten off your own movie. In fact, it's kind of the norm at the studio level for you to be rewritten at least once. So part of writing for the studio system is being rewritten and rewriting other people. So the ability to break down what's really working in a script and being able to not just write, but also assess and diagnose and fix problems in stories, all major parts of doing this on a professional scale. So week 0 is going to be how to actually read and break these things down and give the feedback that the other students would be needing, because you will be placed into groups by the end of this with everyone that commits to signing up for the whole thing. You're going to be submitting your script that you want to use for the boot camp, and we're going to try to If we have multiple groups, which we have in the past, then we will try to, put them in similar areas of interest, perhaps at least comedy and drama, or dramatic and comedic. Not always something we can do, but we try when we can. So week 1 is going to be on the re-outline. So you will have submitted your full script and shared it with your group, and you're going to work on, for that week, a full new outline for the version of your script that exists. And you're also going to read your other 2 student members of your group's scripts and provide them feedback. But that's all by July 9th. Week 2 is going to be on the revision guide. That's when we're going to collect all the notes that we've gotten, all the feedback that we've received, and we're going to use that to create this comprehensive roadmap of the rest of the changes that we're going to make to the story. Week 3 is on those individual passes for character, dialogue, action, or any other elements that just require their own total look through, maybe focusing on one character at a time, just making sure that each of the arcs are being tied off neatly and everything's adding up and making sense. Week 4 is on polish and nailing the tone, so that's on just making those last choices and changes to make sure that you are delivering a coherent story that is fulfilling the emotional promises that you have set out to make. So if all that's done, then the rewrite should be done by July 30th. So that's essentially 6 weeks, because we have week 0, and also you have up until the end of the week that concludes on our July 23rd class. So you are going to have 6 weeks basically from now to write a script over again, or to rewrite a script, to make big changes to it. That's about the time frame that you want to usually be working in. So most of the time we're picking time frames that are more or less like what you're going to be expected to do in the professional sort of working world. It's okay if you fall behind in terms of deadlines or any of these things. There's no grades, but this is just the time frame that you should work on being able to do this thing in. I myself do rewrites professionally, and I have done actually a little quicker than 6 weeks. I've done like 5 weeks in the past for my last 2 of these that I've done, but they end up usually going a little longer than you think they will, because they're like, wait, but what about a couple more changes? What about a couple more changes? And sometimes they'll make you, they have like a certain number of steps that are included, so it'll be like, you have to do 2 main phase rewrites where you will turn in one, and then they give notes, then you turn in another, and then after that, you get what's call the polish, which sounds like it's not much of anything, but it's actually going to be more than you think it will be, and it's going to be more substantial than you would guess from the term polish. But they'll probably try to get like a couple other little minor things out of you, but you have to just at a certain point call it quits yourself. Feature writing is actually much less focused on deadlines than you would assume, at least in the early stages, like when you are writing a script for producers, or you're doing a rewrite or something. Rarely is there actually like a really, really, really hard cutoff date. Maybe there is for like higher level projects, but at least in all the ones that I've done, they've been like, you can ask for more time if you need it. The date is a little more flexible, so try to just deliver it as quickly and efficiently as possible and be really easy and great to work with, because that's how you get more rewrites. You got to sign up for the class if you want to participate beyond today. So you can buy it on its own, scriptcamp.net/classes, there's a link there, or you can sign up for unlimited membership if you have not already done so. We have some people here who are already unlimited members and have access to this and everything else. So make sure scriptcamp.net/membership, you're going to sign up and start a free trial. You'll get 2 weeks, and you can fill out a form that we have here that you can submit your script and get started as soon as possible. Make sure your group members get time adequately to read your script and carefully respond to it. Let's look at, we have membership options here, but I think, like I mentioned before, unlimited is going to get you everything in this course and also just pretty much everything we do on the whole server. So that is the best value there, but we also have a basic option that will give you 8 classes a month. That's just the Wednesday, Thursday classes, and it does not include the labs or boot camps. So we have a couple options there. $5 a month, it's like a cup of coffee basically, but if you just want to be part of the community and participating in these interactive live classes every week, then that's a great way to do it. If you want feedback on your script that's not just from your other group members, you can get more from members of the server. If you post in the features and pilots and scripts channel, or you submit to these table reads or swaps, it's better to get more feedback, because then you have more to draw from. So a little bit beyond the boundaries of this course, it might require you to seek out extra feedback on your own in order to get maximum value out of this, but you should be proactive in doing that, and you should be arranging swaps with people, and someone's much more likely to actually commit to reading your work if you are going to commit to carefully reading and responding to theirs, or just doing them favors of any kind. So like this is a it's not entirely transactional, but it is helpful to to have something that you have helped somebody else out with, and that's how you can get people on your side. That's how you can just form a writing group. We also have writing groups now in the server. That might be a great place to get more feedback. So we have 3 that have started recently. We have one for comedy features, I think, or TV, one for sketch comedy, and a horror writer group that just began. So if you're interested in any of those, you can message us and let us know, or participate in those, and you will just get a lot more, consistent feedback. You can also get full script markup from me. If you're a member, you get $100 off this, but go to scriptcamp.net/coverage, and you can just get feedback from me personally. But I am not giving full feedback on every script in the rewrite program by default. That's what your other group mates are for. If you want full reads and feedback from me, scriptcamp.net/coverage. Okay, so let's look at the overview of this week 0 class. We'll start with looking at rewrite goals and making sure that our objectives are actually solidly in place, because you have to have a set of goals for a rewrite. Just it needs to be better is very rarely kind of specific enough for you to work with and to actually do that. Like the goal is too vague to accomplish that goal. You need a plan of action, and you need a plan of attack. Like saying, I just need to make the script better is like saying, I just need to get to Scotland from America. It's like, well, there's 100 ways you could do that. You might have to take a boat, you might have to take a plane, you might have to stow away on a boat. You can buy a first class ticket, or you can buy a third class ticket. There's like many, many different options. Some are more difficult than others, and some are more efficient than others. So we'll look at some guide rules and just things before we begin to make sure that you have calibrated those expectations and that you know what you are attempting to specifically address in the draft. Then we will just have a little bit on how to be a feature and TV writer, and just explaining the role of rewriting in those. I've already touched on it, so I won't go way too deep into it. I think you guys get the idea. Rewriting is important. You do a ton of it as a writer. That's essentially the gist of those, so we'll kind of speed through. But rewrites for producers and like doing professional rewrites is its own sort of world. We can look at you're doing rewrites for yourself. That's just called drafting. That's just called, some people just call that writing. That's just you doing successive drafts of one project in order to make it as good as possible for yourself, like to include in your portfolio or something along those lines, maybe to make it yourself. Whereas if you're doing professional rewrites, that's you working with other people's material, and you are not in charge. You're not steering the ship. You are just sort of like a temporary captain that they've brought on in order to fix major problems or to address sort of structural issues that are cropping up before they perhaps take it to try to sell it somewhere or try to set it up or try to package it. They will have issues in the script. They always do. And so sometimes multiple writers will be brought in to address the issues that have been caused or unearthed by the previous ones. And you will end up with 5, 6, 7 or more writers on one movie. It happens all the time. And credit becomes very difficult to sort of adjudicate from there. So there's some actually there have been developments recently in the WGA that have been affecting how people can be credited. Like long lists of writers can be credited for their work. All very boring guild stuff, so don't worry about that. But in any case, rewriting is very important. And in this class, we will learn how to do it. That's the gist of today's class. So we'll look at how to analyze scripts, give feedback, and at the end we will try to make those groups. Any questions before we get started? Okay, no questions. Let's get going. So, tell us about the thing that you want to rewrite, assuming you're not here just to listen and audit, essentially. Is this a new draft, or have you rewritten this in the past before? How did you go about those past rewrites, and what are your objectives for this current upcoming rewrite, your upcoming swing at this project? So feel free to weigh in and tell us what is it that you'd like to work on in this course.
Yeah, so I'm nearing the end of my first draft on my first ever screenplay. It's being an animated feature. I'm trying to find a balance between being too descriptive and not being descriptive enough. So I really want to target action and dialogue for the most part, and ways to really improve that, and just see where I could really get the most out of it, and make it something that really stands out in that sense.
Great. Okay.
So those
Yeah. that's a very specific, tangible goal to approach. It sounds like you know what some of the weak spots might be, which is very good.
Well, and mentioning that too, I think the logic of the story as well is always something that's on my mind. Because if I change one thing and it doesn't line up with something that I keep, it's always gonna be. I want to make sure I avoid any of those issues when going through my rewrite as well.
Yeah, yeah. This is why I tell people don't write time travel scripts in Scriptcamp, because they're going to be like destroying their brains trying to make everything fit together and make sense. And these logic problems can sometimes really sink you if they are really pivotal to the whole story. So yeah, good to be on the watch for those as well, and just see what your readers are bouncing off of, see what they are not understanding and what they are being confused by. Anyone else?
I'm considering rewriting a animated half-hour sitcom pilot, and I wrote this with the help of a friend. And I had the story and the arc, the overall story in my mind, and he helped me get like the plot points down.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to understand where, like, if you were to put a map of like story structure over it, what those points are, and make sure that it follows the right structure. Um, am I building up, tension in the right way? Are the stakes high enough? I mean, just kind of basic stuff in a way. And then the dialogue, I think, needs help. And the jokes could be spruced up, I think, as well. So there's a lot of basics, I think, that I'm looking to get feedback on. But really understanding how the story structure, and like, Amanda, you missed, whatever, the initiation plot point, or, you missed this step. Like, I want to kind of understand that.
I see. Okay. So a good class for you to also take would be our pilot class, which
Yeah, I am taking that for that's the one I am taking for a totally different show.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, like practicing on one that is totally new. But
Sure.
this one, it's written, so that's why I say maybe. After tomorrow, I'll know whether I'll be able to also do this at the same time.
Right. Yes. So we normally encourage. We have seen many attempts to do more than one boot camp at once, and no one has successfully been able to do it. So normally, Nacho and I recommend that you just pick one camp at it. I mean, you can just hop in and out. If you're a member, you can just go into any that you want to. But just we haven't seen anyone able to successfully complete more than one. It's just so much intensive work that it's tough to pull off more than one at once. So it's totally up to you how you want to try it.
Well, I'll do one then. I'll wait. I'll decide tomorrow, maybe. Which one.
Sure. Yeah, you can always visit the class and just check it out
Okay.
and see. But yeah, so that's where we'll talk more specifically about pilot structure, for instance, and where you might get a clearer sense of how to assess a pilot, a half-hour one especially, in structural terms, just because that's such a specific format that doesn't come up in the feature class, for instance. It doesn't come up in many classes, just the half-hour format. So, or maybe you just want to do this course and watch our previous video classes on TV pilot writing. You could always do that as well if you just wanted to get sort of more of a sense of the basics of it.
Okay.
But yeah, this will also just be here for you to get the feedback that might be helpful to you. Might be helpful enough for you to figure out what you need to do in a rewrite.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Oops, did I just move my whole frame? There we go. Anyone else? Hopefully we have at least one more. Maybe not. So I guess we have to have at least 3 members of the class just to make sure that every student would get 2 sets of feedback. So maybe you're still working on how you want to tell us or present the story or something like that, but I'll have to check back by the end to make sure that we do have 3 students, because if we don't get 3, then we'll have to change this class slot to something else. So up to you guys, but hopefully one more will tell us about the exciting thing they want to rewrite by the end of class today. Okay, so let's look at the basics of this. Like with most things, the goal is not necessarily to have an amazing script by the end of this. It's going to be in better shape. Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to get you anything? Is it going to get you signed or win a contest or get you a meeting or anything like that? You can't count on it, and it's not really the objective. The objective is to become amazing at writing. Excuse me. And that requires learning how to rewrite, of course, because that's sort of the tipping point where a lot of people go from aspiring amateur to semi-pro, is when they seriously sit down and start looking at the problems in their scripts and rewriting on their own and trying to just improve them as much as possible. Because many of us, when we start, myself included, have this instinct of, okay, well, it's done, I'm bored, I don't want to go back to some old thing that I'm done with, I want to move on to the next thing, which is fine. And like when you're just getting going, that can be a fine way to approach it, and you can totally get a lot of learn a lot of valuable stuff just writing script after script without really revising. So for your first couple, don't really bother revising if you don't feel the need to. But that sort of that moment where you start to really seriously think about what is making these things tick and how to take them to the next level, that's around when most people start actually really seriously trying to rewrite. Again, don't worry if it turns out to be like good or not. Good is not the goal. Your goal is to improve yourself, like this is going to the gym. If you're spending more than 6 months on any script, including all the rewrites that you're doing on it, you probably need to change up your process, especially if you're just starting out. Like, just knock out as many as you can, move on to the next one, and just get good at finishing things. That's much more important than writing one amazing thing, because you'll hit that wall of diminishing returns where it just won't be getting better anymore. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but you got to have a portfolio of 3 to 5 amazing scripts to be a feature writer, to get going as a feature writer. And to be a TV writer, you must have a portfolio of amazing pilots. So that's going to require rewriting those until they are pretty good. But in order to get to just narrow down those into the 3 to 5 that you want in your active portfolio, you're going to have to write a bunch of scripts to get there. And you're going to have to really learn how to rewrite. I think we get the idea. I don't want to talk about the career path. We need to focus on rewriting itself. It's very difficult to gauge where your script is at, or where your skill level is at, and where it needs to be. And a script is just such a long document that it's going to be tough for almost anyone to just pick up and break down, or even for fans of reading, even for readers, the things that make a script really good are different than things that make a book really good, or that make a novel versus a nonfiction book really good, or any of these things. So like an average layman is not used to reading scripts, and so they aren't going to provide to you the most incisive feedback necessarily. And the people that do know how to break down and analyze scripts almost always are doing it for a living. There aren't very many script analyst hobbyists, I should say, script analysis hobbyists. So people who do this professionally will often charge money for it, or they will not be in the mood to do extra work outside of work, so it's very difficult to get their attention and to hold it, and also they will just be sort of, predisposed to hate everything because they're doing extra work outside of work, so they will not have a ton of patience for mistakes or these things, so it's tough to get good feedback, and it's really essential to do that. In order to get the feedback that you need, it's often going to be necessary to get multiple different sources, so not just one person's feedback. You're going to want to make sure that you're getting a range of reactions, and taking the things that work from each of them and looking for those commonalities in the notes. So if one person says something, it's probably just their opinion. If 2 people say the same thing, you should check it out. And if 3 people say the same thing, it's definitely an issue. So it's not everyone is going to be right, and not everyone has great taste, or not everyone would like the script even if it was done really well. And like the goal of feedback is not to push it in the direction that you yourself would want it to go. And that's the difference between good and bad feedback, isn't it? It's like if you are trying to make it seem more like something that you would enjoy, versus if you're trying to recognize what that person is trying to make and trying to push them along the direction of improving that experience and delivering what they are attempting to do as best as possible. So that's at the heart of feedback. Like, you really need to ascertain what each story is attempting to be and like what the writer wants it to be. The goal is not make it something that I would like personally more. The goal is to realize what the author wants and to make sure that they are delivering on that. That's why we spend so long on logline and comps. that it sounds like a little annoying to work so long on this one sentence that is going to sum up the whole story, or these two movies that you pick that are going to be like, it's like this meets that. But that is how you tell what the writers are. If your comps are like a really, really, really serious drama and meets a really serious historical, let's say, adventure movie, and then you suggest a really lighthearted, funny action comedy, or it seems like you're writing a really lighthearted action comedy, people are going to be confused why you picked a drama and a historical film, because it's like you didn't line up your objectives with what you were at. Like, it doesn't seem like your objectives were aligned with the actual product that you were creating. So that's why you need to make sure you're crystal clear on the comps and on the logline. And you're going to share those with the partners that you're working with to make sure that they know what you're going for. It may be that you need to change the content, or it may be that you just need to change the comps. If you realize, oh, this is turning out really grim and serious, I probably need to not pick a light action comedy as one of the comps. I need to pick something more grim and serious to prime the reader so that they know what to expect and they know what kind of thing I am trying to make, so that they can help me create a better version of that. So you have to have a crystal clear picture of the thing that you are trying to make. Any questions on that? Okay, let's keep going. So don't worry way too much if this one rewrite is that good, or if any of them are that good. The goal is just to do a bunch of these. You have to build a road. You get the idea. Okay, so these are the 4 steps of the rewrite process. We start with the re-outline, then move to the notes document, and then we're going to combine those two into what we call the revision guide, and that's going to be the outline that you'll work with to take you all the way to the end. Step 4 is when you actually start rewriting. So notice, out of 5 steps, step 4 is when we actually get to the rewrite itself. The first 3 steps are all, like usual with Scriptcamp, we're focused on really meticulous planning, so we know what's going to be happening on every page, we know what all the changes that we have to make are, and we have a really clear, just like, guide that is going to... The guide will, if we stick with it, it will accomplish all of our objectives. So I guess we should... let's go over briefly what each of these things are, and then we can talk working on paid rewrites briefly, and then we'll go into what you should pick, and like everyone will be getting ready to actually share their project with us. So the steps. So number 1 is going to be the re-outline. The re-outline might sound a little kind of intimidating, but it is one of the most important things in terms of organization, and you might find yourself having to do several of these if you are hired, like I have been, to write something, or to rewrite a script that has been rewritten 5 times by 5 different people, so there are 5 versions of it out there. I've had to go back and fully re-outline previous versions in a row in order to keep all the changes distinct and separate, and make sure that everyone's going to be on the same page. Because so much of what you're doing when you're doing this professionally is keeping people on the same page. So the organization of the re-outline, the re-outline is basically just an outline that reflects the script as it currently stands. It is not the changes you want to make. It is just like a truncated bullet point outline with like 1 sentence per scene that can use a little bit of shorthand. It doesn't have to be perfect, unless you're keeping other people in the loop, or trying to work with collaborators, in which case will want to write this just a little more, complete sentences with full character names and stuff. But basically, you are creating an outline that reflects what the script looks like currently, flaws and warts and all. So if there are big mistakes, you're going to just include those. You're going to include every scene that you currently have that you ended up with at the end of your last writing process. You're going to start a new document to keep track of all of these changes, and you're going to use this re-outline in order to get this full pulled back bird's eye view of your story, so that you can see the whole thing. It can be really tough to see the whole thing, especially if you've changed a lot from your initial outlines that you used when writing the first draft. It can be hard to now tell what the story is sometimes, so it's really nice to have this like 1 to 2 page shortened version of it that you can see the entire thing right in front of you, and you can start to sort of think of how you might mold it like clay. So that re-outline, super essential to finish that in the first week, for your sake and for the sake of everyone else working with you. The next thing is the notes document, and that is going to be when you get feedback from 2 different people over the course of the week that follows. And that week is going to be important because you're taking the commonalities between all the notes that you have gotten, and those are going to be the most important things to focus on. You'll see what you agree with and see what you don't. You don't have to take every single note that you get. And part of the kind of weird mystical elements of doing this is that you have to the careful art of taking only what the executives or people in charge have told you that is going to make it better, and ignoring everything else very sort of carefully. Like, if you don't bring it up again, they might just not bring it up again, or they might not even, the thing is, they might not even remember giving you that note. And if you can address the problem that is created by that note in a different way than they thought that they would, they're almost always fine with it. Like, if you fix it or make it so that's not even a problem anymore, they're going to think you're a wizard, and be like, whoa, how did you do that? And you're going to blow everyone away. So you can absolutely just take the note, what we call the note behind the note, which is the implication or the problem that has been identified by the person giving the note, even if their prescription for fixing it is not necessarily what you're going to go with. That's what notes are mostly for. They're mostly for assessing where the problem areas are. As for fixing those problems, that's your job, and you have to be confident enough that you can do that and steer the ship. If it's someone else's project, that you can, take it into calmer waters from where it currently is. It can be a lot of work, but we try to pull it off in our, as quickly as possible with, and just be as pleasant to work with throughout the entire experience as you possibly can, because, after 5 years and 5 different writers, or 10 different writers in 10 years, whatever it is, tensions can run high and people can get really frustrated if it seems like the script is not improving. So you gotta maintain good relations with everyone that you're working with. That's outside of these steps, though. So yeah, we have 1, re-outline. Number 2, notes document. You get the feedback. Number 3 is the revision guide. That is going to be, you're going to make a copy of your re-outline, so you have that completely self-contained document on its own to refer back to see this was the previous version. You can even export it as a PDF if you want to. It doesn't matter. And then you're going to make a copy of that, and that's what you're going to work from to make your revision guide. And that is, you're going to, the process of that is you take all the notes that you want to address and the changes that you want to make from the notes document, and you're just going to copy and paste them into the revision guide, so that way you have a full, truncated version of the story, and you can see where all the changes are going to go. So you have a full chronological timeline of the entire thing, and you can start to mark up, this is going to change here, this is going to change here, I need to delete this, I need to remove this, and you're going to color code it in order to keep yourself on track. If this is new to you, this might be a little overwhelming to think of, gosh, re-outlines and notes documents and aggregations and color codings and all these things, but I promise you it is designed to make your life easier and to avoid the chaos of just opening a script and making changes willy-nilly freestyle, because that very rarely is going to result in successively improved and completely distinct new drafts. You want to be able to concisely say, this is draft 2, this is draft 3, this is draft 4. We don't want to have this ever-changing blob of a document. Okay, so that revision guide will be that color-coded document that's going to help you through the rest of this. Then you start the rewrite, which is where you will actually start a brand new blank document, and you can copy and paste in scenes from your last version as needed, but that should not be what you do by default, and you should just allow yourself this sort of psychological freedom of the field of fresh and untrodden snow, as I call it, which is the just blank white expanse of the page will help you sort of come up with new stuff a little easier and link scenes in a different way and just build the experience again from the ground up. It sounds annoying, but it's not that bad, and it doesn't make it take way longer or anything like that, but you should be ready to write new scenes as needed and make new connective tissue between scenes, and don't just lean on the previous draft every time. You should be you're not pretending anything. You should be preparing to approach this as if it is a completely new script that is, inspired by the last one and includes many elements of the last one, but some elements might be totally new. Or, in the rewriting that I've done for managers, I've had to do 7, 8 drafts usually before they will even go out with it over the course of 6 months. And I've had managers tell me, here's a whole new character you should include as of draft 4. And that totally changes everything, and I have to completely rethink it. And it's sometimes you will get curveballs like that you are, unless you have the system of organization, there's almost no way to keep your head straight. And imagine doing that, and it's a time travel movie. Then you're going to really flip your lid. In any case, this is all supposed to be architecture that's here to help you. This is safety nets and double reverse safety nets and like all these extra features that are supposed to, every time you open up your notes, you should know exactly where you are, exactly what changes to make next, and we're moving right through the document so you can track your progress really carefully. We want to avoid this sensation of, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not actually changing anything, I'm just fiddling. You're not just fiddling, you have a plan of attack. Make sense? Okay, so let's look at the chat, see if we have any questions. Monica says, I have an animated pilot to trade. Okay, great. So if two people have pilots they want to trade, that would be great. Okay, that looks like all for now. But yeah, so you can write a pilot, or you can rewrite a pilot, or a feature, or a short in this class. It's up to you. And if you are writing something shorter, you will just perhaps be able to get slightly more detailed feedback, considering if it's half as much reading or a fourth as much reading to do, then somebody will be able to read it faster and, in theory, respond in more detail. So that's just something to consider. You can include a full feature, but nothing above 120 pages, please. Okay, so what is it like working with producers on paid rewrites? So this is what I do when I'm not running classes for Scriptcamp, in addition to a couple other odd things. This is where a lot of writers will kind of just, they gravitate to this when they're not, like, it's hard to just sell feature after feature after feature. And there's other types of work that we can get, especially nowadays when there's just so few spec sales every year. We have to find other sources of income and other ways to continue to work in the industry. So things like polishes, rewrites are going to be when you are coming in for various scales of changes on on scripts that are out there. So you can do this for WGA signatories, or you can do this for non-WGA signatories, in which case they can pay you whatever they want. There are no minimums if you're not working with a guild signatory, and that's why you want to be guild ultimately, because you are guaranteed certain amounts of money and certain protections and certain certain ways to get to recompense if you are is that the right word? If you are treated unfairly, or if like they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, the guild will help with those things. Whereas if you're not doing a non-guild project, then it's kind of, you get what you get, and you can get paid as little as $1,000 to $2,000 for several months of rewrites, and depending on the kind of deal you make. Anything is on the table. They might ask you to rewrite something for free, and you can say yes or no, or you can ask for whatever you want, and you can make whatever deal you want. But the point is, unless you're working for guild signatory, you're not going to be making enough to really live off of doing this. It's a good way to make contacts and to maintain relationships with production companies. And like, if you do a really great job, maybe they would later read a script from you and consider adding it to their development slate or something like that. So it can be really worth doing this, even though it's not gonna like make you a rich celebrity overnight. This is the workman, like, day-to-day trades craft of writing. This is the equivalent of, they bring in a contractor to fix the brickwork when it starts to crumble, kind of thing. You're not here to redesign the entire building. You're here because what they want to hear is, it's not going to take a page one rewrite. I can totally see how to fix this. Like that, if you come on to a project that is in trouble, well, first of all, they're only bringing you on because it is in trouble. Nobody's going to ask you to come on and rewrite a script that everything's working fine and everyone's happy with. So there's going to be concerns from various parties that are going to be so extreme that they have decided to hire someone and bring them on. So not extreme in that this doesn't happen often, but they have enough concerns that they need to hire someone to fix the issues. So in fixing those issues, your job is to make them feel confident and to assure them that they are not wasting their time and that you are not a hacker or nobody who's going to run away. Because often, if even non-guild, they sometimes will pay you up front for this, and then they're just going to be praying and crossing their fingers that you will actually do it. And not screw them over or be some nobody that messes everything up or ghosts them. So you can tell that the bar is kind of low for proper behavior here. And if you can, in fact, turn the project around and really fix it and save it, you will earn massive amounts of points because, especially non-guild, they don't know what they're going to get from you. So if you exceed those expectations, that is a good way to just move up in the world in whatever way. But basically, you have to establish confidence, and you're like the new captain at the wheel of the ship, and they need to feel reassured that they are in good hands, so that you want to make sure that in those early meetings, you seem like you really grasp what makes the script tick, And because you'll probably have a meeting about this before they even give it to you, they'll probably be like, what do you think of the script? What do you think the issues are? And yeah, I've done these calls lots of times. They don't pay you for this, but they will just ask, what would be your assessment? It's like going to the doctor. What's wrong with me, doctor? And you should approach that. You don't have to write something up in a lot of detail to give them. And in fact, due to recent initiatives and pushes from this movement called No Writing Left Behind, you probably shouldn't turn them in a completely written document. You should just have that verbal conversation with them on the phone. And going into it, you should have marked up I just take a notebook and I just write out my assessment as I go. And then I try to, when you go into the call, try to have a really organized way of presenting what the issues are. So you want to give them, like, the way that I do it is give them a table of contents at the beginning. So say, okay, my issues with this script the issues with the script that need to be resolved are falling into 3 major categories. The first is the management of the different timelines. The second, which I'll address after that, is the character development of the main couple. And the last major point that I will get to is going to be the pacing. And then when you get to each of those sections, you'll say, okay, now on to part 2, the pacing. So just keep them on track, make sure that they can, if they're taking notes themselves or if they're just listening to you, they can really clearly track what you're saying and like how far through what your assessment you are. And then at the end, you want to sort of restate. And those were the 3 major problems. So if we can fix the character arcs, the pacing, and whatever the other thing I said was, then we'll have a much stronger product moving forward. So if you can say all that very articulately and very incisively and make big calls, like say, I don't think we need the subplot in the second act in which our character makes a digression and goes on a trip to Amsterdam. I think that the movie would work structurally better without that. And you might have to it might make them a little uneasy to hear about big sweeping changes, but if you can project that confidence and you can assure them that they're not seeing the forest for the trees, then you're in good shape, because that's already a suspicion that they have. And they already are worried that they are not, that's why you're there, is because they're like, oh shoot, we can't see the forest for the trees, we can't see where the problems are. So on a rewrite that I did at the beginning of this year, or maybe the end of last year, I was given a thriller that was on its 5th draft, and it was 120 pages long. And my first assessment, my first thing right out of the gate was, oh, this is easy. This is 30 pages too long. It isn't easy to make those changes, but it's easy to tell them a bunch needs to go from this, and they'll be like, yes, we know. So make sure to tell them some things that they already know and they already agree with, and then when you move forward into the big sweeping changes, or the biggest changes that you're going to make, just make sure that they feel like you know what you're doing and that you have a really clear picture of what that's going to look like on the other side. So yeah, that's how I approach rewrites with producers. As for getting these jobs, you're mostly going to get those from in the kind of non-WGA world, from writer contacts or friends of yours that have worked with those production companies before. Sometimes it'll be like they get offered a rewrite, but they're not able to do it because they're busy with something else, and they'll be like, oh shoot, my friend can do it though. That's how I've gotten a few in the past. Just it's going to be very based on networking and referrals in the non-guild world. Once you have reps and once you are working at a higher scale, then your management and your team can get you rewrites or get you rewrite meetings on higher scale projects. But at the lower levels, you kind of just need to figure it out. Like, there's not one way to get these. It's helpful if you have something to point to in terms of your own work, feature work especially, where you can say, like, I won this contest, so that's why you should hire me for this. Like, if you have some sort of script that has gotten any kind of accolades or recognition, you should be leading with that. If you don't have any accolades or recognition, you're almost certainly not going to get rewrite jobs, unless it's maybe from local filmmakers. I mean, check your Craigslist, check your local filmmaking groups. Sometimes people will just say, I have a script that has issues. Can anyone help me? I might, sometimes they'll pay, sometimes they won't. You never know what you're going to get. But in general, networking is going to get you the actually highest scale of industry jobs on this. Okay, so where does that leave us? Questions on anything we talked about? Okay, no questions. Let's keep going. So your rewrite project would need to be done and ready for sharing by the end of today. So we have a form that you can fill out in which you can describe it briefly and include the logline and the comps and things like that. And you should just get used to sharing work at the early stages, even with your other students and with me, even if it's not done or if it's not perfect. I know it can be tough to hear those big notes at those early stages, but you just need to, it's a really essential part of this is the notes that you're going to get and the feedback that you'll receive, and constantly having to change the story that you're working on. So get used to that. This is not like writing novels at home or writing webcomics where you can just do whatever you want and publish it, or, you know, self-publishing. You can do whatever you want, but if you are writing for film, then you need to get used to this idea of heavy collaboration at every level. If you're going to continue past this class and you haven't already signed up, just keep in mind you will have to proceed using your real name, or a real name, maybe a nickname or middle name or something like that. And so just not a screen name. But that's after today. So for today you're fine, but for the sessions to come, you should be prepared to use a real name. Okay, so if you are not ready for feedback, you can still participate in the class. You can still show up for these, but we need to make sure we have at least 3 students actually committed to giving that feedback to each other and attending the 4 classes and the doing the rewrite. You don't have to, like, if you have to miss a class or 2, it's fine, but you can always follow along with the videos. But the minimum that we need people to commit to is, I'm going to read 2 scripts and give those people feedback within 1 week. But you can still follow along the class, assuming we are running, even if you don't want to get feedback on your own thing. Okay, so process for analyzing scripts for your own or someone else's. I think instead of asking what's your process for this, let me ask you, what are some things that are going to be important when analyzing a script? What are some of the major areas to look at? Shout them out. What do we got?
Premise, structure, originality, whether it's high concept or, let's see, I guess dialogue. I mean, that's probably the last thing to look at, maybe. I can't remember, but that's all I can think of right now.
You're correct with all of those. Yep, we want to look at premise and structure and dialogue, all those things. What else?
I was going to say it retains my interest.
Yeah, just a general assessment of, am I intrigued by this? Am I pulled in by this? Because, as we often say, if you are not drawing the audience in with every scene, then you are the people who are going to be reading your script are people who read a lot of scripts for the most part, and they know what to look for. They've read a bunch of bad ones today, and they're looking for an excuse for their eyes to glaze over and to stop paying attention and start skimming, which is the worst thing to happen. You don't want that to happen. So yeah, just, is it holding my attention? Is it intriguing me? What else?
As you mentioned before, the comps to get oriented, and then I like how you called out, you know, looking at the timeline, the character arcs, and the pacing as sort of 3 different ways of categorizing the comments you have.
Sure, yeah. So you can absolutely just you can break it up however you want. There are just certain things that are on coverage guides, and like there's certain documentation that goes around that sort of breaks down how to actually assess scripts. Those are some of the major categories, you know, things like character arc and pacing and the chronology. So if there's some kind of complicated structure, just making sure everything is cohering together, that's often going to be one of the main categories. And also just in terms of categories to look at for how to assess a story, I think it's sort of going to be like what we look at with every single line and with every single page. It's clarity, brevity, and voice. So clarity is going to be the main category, and if anything in the script is unclear, you should start your assessment by saying the first of the areas that we need to assess is the clarity of blank. So that's always going to be top priority.
Yeah, that's one of the things when I'm reading someone's script and it's outside of my, say, expertise or my interest, that's the one thing I always say. I can at the very least tell you what's clear, because if I can't understand it, nobody can, you know.
Sure,
like
sure.
I'm a good so that's, yeah, I like the clarity one's a good one, because it's if you really, you know, if the person trusts that you're really going to focus in on it and give it all your attention, even if they don't know how to, you know, guide you to like how do you move this scene where and what, know all the lingo. They can at least give you that feedback. So yeah.
Right. The nice thing is that your job is not to, in giving notes, your job is not to do the writer's job. You don't have to prescribe for them how to fix the problems. Your job is just to identify where the problems are. So that's, I'm gonna write down a couple things on our sort of, pretend it's like a blackboard almost. So one, your job is not to be the writer. Your job is to assess, let's say find/assess problems. So find/assess meaning you want to identify what the issue is and then assess it in terms of how bad is it. So if you're giving feedback and there's like, there's a few jokes that don't land, you probably don't want to lead with that. You want to lead with the, so yeah, let's lead with biggest issues. So script analysis 101/giving feedback. So yeah, you want to lead with the biggest issues and kind of provide notes in descending order of importance. So start with the big stuff. This character isn't really working. This entire plot line is confusing and I don't understand what happened. The ending is anticlimactic and I was left underwhelmed. And I, try to focus on your own responses rather than saying, but rather than saying things are good or bad. Focus on how it made you feel. Rather than objectively saying good/bad. So I was finding my attention wandering at this point. What are some other examples of things that you might say? You might say, instead of saying this part was boring, you might say, I found myself disengaging or drifting away from this part, and you should have some inkling as to why. So try to explain your feelings if you can. You don't have to have a perfect explanation. You can also say something like, I'm not sure why I was feeling this way at this point, but I was, and no one can tell you you're wrong. So nobody can refute how it made you feel, assuming that our assumption is going to be that you paid good attention to it and read the entire thing. So please do actually pay good attention to it and read the entire thing, or else the whole process falls apart. If it's like, I missed, where did Jeremy come from? And it's like, well, Jeremy entered on page 7. You just weren't reading carefully. Then you're going to look like a fool. And the rest of your notes are just not they're going to seem diminished in importance and quality if it's like, well, you missed something so essential as finding where Jeremy was. Jeremy's introduction scene, the most important in the entire script. So, make sure you are reading actually carefully. It's only 2 other scripts to read. It doesn't take much longer than, it would take to watch the thing, to read the thing, usually. So, about 2 hours to read a feature, 1 to 2 hours to read a feature. Reading a pilot, 30 minutes to an hour at most, usually. So, really do pay attention and make sure that you are establishing that baseline of, I did my work on this, you should listen to me, I am an authority, in terms of, I read this, I paid attention. So, I'll just put that as my rule 0. This is so disorganized. I'll just do a list of bullet points. Let's not number them. So before anything else, let's just say, actually read carefully. That might require you to read more than once. If it's a very complex story, it might be essential. We're not going to require that you read anything more than once, but often when providing really serious professional feedback, if you want to go about this the right way, you will read it once all the way through, just not making any notes. Then the second time you will go through, and that's when you'll actually make the notes. So read once, we'll say dry or blind, cold, and then once making notes and more careful assessments. So in order to do this, you actually have to have a pretty strong understanding of principles of especially screenwriting. So you need to have a good foundation and structure. To give good feedback, you must have a good understanding of structure. I mean, if you don't have a great understanding of structure, you can still say things like, I felt bored at this part, or I kept waiting for something to happen at this part, or anything like that. You can still make those judgments, but it just becomes much harder for you to say something like, your catalyst is, in my opinion, I felt that the catalyst was coming too late, and that it was taking too long for the story to get started. Or you might say something like, the midpoint was nebulous and murky and unclear to me. Or you might say any of these, if you can actually talk in really clear 3-act structure terms, you will just be able to give better feedback and also receive it better. because you might be able to clarify. Somebody says, like, I was bored in this part, and you might say, would putting the act break right before that fix it? And they might say yes, if they know what you're talking about. So helpful to get a knowledgeable reader that knows how to actually speak in these correct terms. So let me add another note here. Review structure / fundamentals so that you can assess things in those terms. Then actually read carefully, pay attention once cold, and then perhaps once to make notes. You can make notes as you go through. You don't have to read twice, but it can be useful. What else? With some of the categories that we're looking at, we mentioned a few of them. So we want to assess structure. That's going to often be one of the first things that you notice. I mean, if we can look at, I was mentioning CBV, which is the principle of clarity, brevity, and voice. And if that's going to apply to every single line of our writing, we can also apply it to the entire script, just in terms of clarity. Brevity is going to refer to structure and also just pacing. So are things taking too long to happen, and is there too much stuff here? You can really easily make some of your first assessments by just looking at the page count. Let's look at some genres, and let's think of what the ideal page count is usually going to hover around. So we have, some people are doing pilots in the class too, so we'll include pilots. So we have 30-minute pilots, 60-minute pilots, and then we'll do features. Let's do horror, action, historical drama. Well, let's put them separate. And then comedy. Okay, so how long exactly in terms of pages is a 30-minute pilot going to be?
Should be 30, though most TV pilots are like 24 minutes actually, with commercials and stuff.
Yeah.
Or at least the old.
That is true. Just in the old time slot was about 24 minutes, but regardless, the scripts themselves are usually going to be about 30 to 35 pages long. You can be like, I don't think I've seen a half-hour show go above 35 pages. After 30, it's going to start to just look like a 35-minute show after a while. So you really want to be careful. Not like TV is very, very strict about pages. So if you look at a pilot and you can already tell, oh, this is 38 pages long, your first note is going to be, this is too long. The brevity is not working. Remember, clarity, brevity, voice. Brevity tells you that you can tell it's too long just by looking at the number of pages. Or it might be too short. This might be 26 pages, and you're like, you need just like a couple more scenes. And it's better to have that extra room, because then you're like, you can add whatever you want. Rarely is adding something going to be the fix to a problem, but if your script is just too short, it really can be. So that's nice there. How about a 60-minute pilot? Anybody?
Should be 60 probably. Is a 45-minute pilot an actual thing anymore? Or I guess they make a lot of like 45-minute shows in streaming.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen a 45-page pilot is the thing. Your options are basically half hour or full hour, in terms of pilot writing. Otherwise, it's just going to seem like you misunderstood the format. Yeah, I would definitely don't write 45 pages. It's either 30 to 35 or 60 to 65. Okay, and so that's like a little movie almost. 65 pages. That's getting up towards a movie. All right, how about horror or thriller? Would those be better if they were shorter or longer? On the longer end or shorter end?
.107 seems to be the magic grips.
107? That's so specific. Wow.
Shorter, I would think.
Yeah, shorter is generally going to be what you want to err on for this. Like, the closer to 90 you can get it, that's going to be the sweet spot. 107 seems long to me. Like, especially for a horror thriller, if you turn that in, almost everyone's first note will be, why is this 107 pages? I mean, maybe if it's like an A24 type horror drama where we have a lot more build-up, then perhaps it might be longer. There are certain subgenres where it might make sense. Thrillers, though, I've never seen a thriller above 100 pages. And when I get thrillers to rewrite, my first note is always, why is this above 90 pages? The nice thing about horror and thriller is, especially in this subgenre or in these genres you can get away with 80 to 90. That's sort of that's like the Starbucks secret menu. Like you're not supposed to know that you can do that, or whatever. It's not actually a secret, but this is the, I'll just say, actually acceptable. Do we have a question? No. Okay, I think we're just getting a little buzz of feedback from Amanda's mic. If you wouldn't mind clicking the mute in the bottom left, Amanda. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, horror thriller shorter because why? Because it's tougher to sustain tension and suspense for a longer runtime usually, and you want to make sure that you're getting in and getting out and delivering on the thrills, and then you're gone. It's like a ride, you know, a roller coaster ride. How about action?
I would think similar. But...
It is similar. You get a little more room. So I'm gonna say like around. I'm just making this up. There's not actually one answer to this, but I'm just gonna say 100 because like depending on your subgenre of action, it's not gonna be as quite as frantic and in your face as a thriller would be. And sometimes if you're doing something like a war film, then you need a little more context and build up and like getting to know all the characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just gonna say about 100 for action. But when I write action, I am for 90. I guess I'm normally writing action thrillers. How about historical drama? Is that going to be on the shorter or longer end?
Longer.
Yeah. So what page count do you think are we maxing out at here?
110 to 120.
Yeah, I would say that's about the case. So I'm almost never going to recommend you go over 120, but this is one of the few genres where you might. Don't turn those in at Scriptcamp usually because that's just going to be creating lots of extra work for us. But and especially if you're newer at this, you want to just pick shorter projects for yourself because it's more manageable, and you want to just be able to move on quicker because you will learn more from writing 5 bad scripts than you would from fiddling with one okay script for a long time. So try to just move on to the next thing. But then again, yeah, historical drama. Sometimes I read a historical drama by S. Craig Zoller that was 160 pages. So that's the longest script I've ever read. And it is possible in this genre to go pretty high. You generally, if you're newer at this, try to stick to that, 100 to 110 kind of range. But you get a little more leeway here. And comedy is a little bit variable, but I've seen these thrive best in the sort of 90 to 105 range. Does anyone have a question about their genre, or did I not mention someone's genre? They're wondering, how long should my script be?
The most advice I ever got is just, at least for initial drafts, just write as much as you can, and then as time goes on, you'll kind of condense that. I know for like most going back to my genre, I know, and as an animated feature, I know most of them are like between 120 to 140 pages.
On spec? Or do you mean the drafts that you've read of existing animated films?
The drafts that I've read, the finished ones too.
Right. So animated movies are written in like a very complicated and difficult way. I know my friend Nick writes animated movies for Sony, and the way that they come together, they actually sort of like, it's not really the same as live action. So I wouldn't necessarily look at the completed scripts from those as that's what my specs should be. I would look at those as sort of the result of the crazy Frankenstein process of creating a Hollywood animated movie. So when you're writing those, definitely don't be writing 140. You want to probably stick to the confines of the genre that your animated film falls in. So if this is an animated comedy, probably 90 to 105 sort of thing. So on a spec level, you want to be more judicious and careful with your page counts than you'd find in like finished product scripts. I guess I would just caution you. But yeah, I'm sure you can find like, the thing is they go through so many years of development that they can end up like at almost any length, and they get totally pulled apart and rebuilt like again and again and again as they are created. It's kind of a nightmare. I'm glad
that's right here. I guess just being where I am and how much experience I have with this whole process, it's really just been writing as much as I can.
Yeah, that's fine. There's no problem with that, and you're right. You're correct that the rewrite is a place to rein in the page count. You shouldn't don't let it stop you or kill your momentum just because you're like, I'm going too long. You can definitely just write as much as you want, and then this is the process of rewriting where you're trying to rein it into, a reasonable runtime. And that's what, you're... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that was my dog. I'm sorry. But, I was also mentioning, I also heard that the 60-30, 30-60-30 was a good starting point. I don't know how much you also look at, you believe in that.
What is 30-60-30?
It's the way you break down the first. It's something I've heard, how you break down the three acts in your movie. 30 pages, 60 pages, 30 pages is like what you should shoot for.
That would be 120 every time, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so I would not agree with that because I'm not usually writing 120 page long scripts. I'm writing 90 page scripts, so mine look more like what is it, 25, 30, 20. I forget how it breaks down. I have a slide about this. But yeah, no, I wouldn't. That sounds kind of old-fashioned-y to me. I wouldn't take that as gospel or anything. If that works for you and you're writing scripts like that, then sure. And yeah, a 30-page first act, 60-page second act, 30-page final act sounds fine for some things, and that might work. But yeah, I don't use that myself. Okay, so where are we? So we're still looking at how to assess a script, how to break this down. What points should we be paying attention to as we are reading? So the first thing, like we said, clarity, brevity, voice. That brevity is going to be assessing, is this as long as it needs to be? If it is too long, then one of your first notes will be, you should cut some scenes, and perhaps you should try to assess which ones are superfluous enough to the main spine of the narrative that you can suggest which scenes should be cut, but you don't necessarily need to. Your job is not to tell them how to fix the problems. Your job is to identify how parts of the story made you feel. Does that make sense to everyone? So don't worry about, you don't have to be a master architect to do this. You just have to be able to sense how you are enjoying the story. And unless you read a lot of scripts, this might be more difficult. I mean, if you would just think reading scripts is boring, and if you've read less than 10 scripts, then maybe you're just like, I don't really like reading scripts, so you'll be like, I was bored the whole time. That's not a great note. So the point is, you should be reading a lot of scripts. I say 3 scripts every single week, at the very least, or not at the very least. I should say 1 a week at the very least. But 3 a week is what I would aim for. It doesn't take that long to read a script. So you should just make sure that you have enough familiarity with the fundamentals and the groundwork of this that you can make these assessments. If you feel you don't, then you probably just need to read more scripts before you come back and attempt to do this. Last thing is going to be voice. How do we assess voice, and what exactly is voice?
I think voice is sort of what the writer sounds like to the reader, and whether it sounds like or whether it's a conversational tone or a formal tone. It is the tone that we're taking in sort of in the private space of reader and writer, I think.
That's a nice way of phrasing it. Yeah, what the writer sounds like to the reader. That's cool. Does somebody else have an answer? Go ahead.
I'm thinking, I don't know how much I've ever analyzed voice in scripts, but I would think that an issue that could come up would be consistency. Like, or it doesn't fit the genre. But I'm like, how would I analyze? I'm curious what kinds of issues you find with voice. That, because those are the only couple things that I could think of.
Well, those are important. Consistency, and if it fits the genre. I mean, so what we're really talking about is tone. So the tone is going to tell you, like, what is the emotional experience of reading this, and what is the emotional experience attempting to be conveyed, not just through the things that are happening, but through the document itself, right? So if you have a story that is clever and funny, it would probably help if you wrote it in a clever and funny way. If you take a really grim and serious story and write that with little jokes and asides to the reader, you're going to get weird looks, and they're going to be like, why are you doing this exactly? Like, what is the intended effect of that? So you're right. Those are some of the major things to look at. Does this fit the world that it's in? I think that's, you will just develop this over years of writing, and you will come to sort of find a voice that works for you. And like, there's not one right or wrong way to do this. I will say one of the big things here is that you will feel this issue if it's off, or if it's not working, I guess you should say. So voice and screenwriting, like, a lot of people's voices sound similar because what we're writing functions at a bare bones level. We're not trying to show off with the prose for the most part. We are trying to communicate a story and show a story happening and have the impressive elements of that be the impact of those narrative moments and like the characters' decisions and the lines they say and the things they do and all that stuff is what's supposed to impress us. We're not really supposed to be impressed by the words themselves usually, but if you lean into that and you say, I know I'm not supposed to impress the reader with the words I choose, but I'm going to, with that caveat, I am going to write this the most evocatively and interestingly that I possibly can within the boundaries of the medium. That's good screenwriting. That's when you will find scripts that you're like, oh my god, I see what this medium's actually really good at, because you just wrote that in a way that somebody only could in a screenplay. There aren't really as strict formal rules when it comes to elements of style or writing or prose on the page. So people's own distinctive, like, you have a lot more variability in what different voices would look like on the page when it comes to screenwriting. So you can't really penalize people for trying something different or for being a little not like doing something a little unusual. But that's why the kind of rule of thumb here is you will feel this as an issue if this will manifest as a problem if it feels like it's not working. So don't go, if you feel like, I don't know, the voice seems fine, then don't go looking for problems in it. Just say it's working okay. But what are some ways that we can sort of use voice? I mean, I've written some scripts in very different voices. I use different voices in different genres. I think that, for instance, it can be very evocative and interesting in especially like a horror story to write it in this very literary way where the audience won't be expecting kind of beautiful metaphors and things like that as you're describing somebody, you know, chopping someone's head off. They're going to be kind of impressed by that just sort of by default, if you can really pull it off. And that's a good way to create that sort of like interesting literary horror tone, and is to just the words that you pick and just using excellent vocabulary and making sure that you're adhering to all the elements of style. I write in a very kind of... My friend Nick, who I mentioned before, has read my work, and he was kind of like surprised at first because he was like, oh, you're like doing this like a writer. He's like, you're like a writer's writer. And I was like, what? Yeah, what? You're not? And he writes his scripts in a very sort of jokey, I don't want to say gimmicky, but like very, you know, postmodern screenwritery kind of way, with a lot of asides to the reader and a lot of little winks and like a very kind of casual, flippant tone to it that really works for what he's doing, because he's writing comedy, so that really does work for what he's doing. I'm not usually writing comedy, and if I was, maybe I would take a similar tone, but I'm usually writing things like horror or thriller or action or historical drama, things like that. So I write in a very a little bit more novelistic way, but with very much sticking within the boundaries of the medium. So you're going to find your own voice here. You're going to find your own kind of like character to use that is writing this, basically, is a nice way to think of it. So like when I'm writing horror, I like to sort of take on the tone of a man who is very a man delivering tragic news, basically. So I like to take that very mournful approach to writing horror, especially, and the details that you focus on, and like the similes and the ideas that you're using in the text, all very kind of beautiful, but like kind of elegiac in a way, where it seems like we're sort of lamenting the loss of something. So you might use that tone, or you might pick your own tone. Maybe you write horror and you're like, I want it to be really kind of like brutal and like it feels like we're chewing on sandpaper, like really concrete, to the point, short clipped lines that are just like, you know, knife enters neck, blood weeps. Like if you're just picking really like punchy statements like that versus, you know, a much more flowery and elegant one, it's entirely up to you, and you'll just find your own thing. But when you're assessing someone else's voice, the main question you have to ask is something here throwing me off, or is something here not making sense? Any questions about voice? Or tone? No questions? Okay, let's keep going. So, where were we? Let's talk about giving and receiving feedback. So, we don't... How do we not want to give feedback? Let me start with that question. What are some obnoxious or annoying ways of giving or receiving feedback?
Being yelled at.
No one likes to be yelled at. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if your first instinct is I'm going to yell this feedback at the person receiving it, then maybe take a step back and, I don't know, get an anger management class or something. It's just a story, you know, unless the script you read is called Why Connor Sucks So Much, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is about me, then maybe you can yell at them. But, like, normally, it's a story and they tried their best. You should approach it from the perspective of someone has trusted you with this and they've put their baby in your hands or whatever. It's not that serious, it's just a story, but, like, you should take that seriously, the idea that someone has trusted you to help them with this and to improve the health of this. This project is sick in some way, and you're going to assess some of the symptoms to help them out. What are some other ways we don't want to give or receive feedback?
I think like not appreciating the process, because everyone starts at some point, and just because a writer is not at a certain level, it doesn't mean that they can't someday get to that point, and you're there to help them improve.
Mhm.
I think just not appreciating where the writer is at that point in time of their writing life.
Sure, that's a good way to phrase that. Something I try to do very carefully in I've been teaching classes for 2 years on Scriptcamp, or like a year and a half on Scriptcamp, and so I've taught classes of summer camps and many other drama schools and things like that. So you always have to try to meet them where they are. You have to realize, I mean, when I'm giving feedback to a bunch of 6th graders who are turning in their first ever play script that they've ever written, my responses are not going to be, how is this going to stand up to Scorsese, you know? I'm like, you got to realize it's written by a 6th grader. It's their first ever story. And try to just, again, assess what their goals were. How close did they come to achieving them? The answer might be not at all, and that is okay. Like, you can give the feedback. I think that it was trying to be this, and it fell short in these ways. But yeah, do try to understand where they are, and like, you're not holding everyone to the standard of, is this something that would be a blockbuster hit movie if it was to come out in this current state? You're trying to assess the draft in front of you and find the constructive improvements to make in it.
I always, when I write everything that I like or laugh at, I actually note. I go LOL, like I note every beat that I get. And when something surprises me in that good way, I always I just think it's nice, because then when you get to the confusing parts, the person knows that you've also noticed what's good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm probably overly generous in that way, but I do think it's helpful, because when someone only gets feedback on the things that are wrong, they don't know if anything was good. I mean, it's like, well, what did work? Because that telling someone what did work can actually also be really helpful.
Absolutely.
That's just my experience. But
no, I totally agree. Like, you gotta try to find, I mean, I think we probably thought of this idea before. You gotta give the positive and the negative, but it can be really overwhelming to just get a slew of negative notes. And most of the time in screenwriting, what you're getting is only negative notes. This is not a medium for people who want, like, because when we're drawn to doing art or performance, and this is kind of a little bit of both. I mean, it's art and it can be performed. We are drawn to those things because we want to go up on stage, do the thing, and then get the applause from the audience, or at the very least, you know, you can draw a picture and post it on your Facebook and you'll get some likes on it or something like that. Like, we want to get some kind of recognition that we didn't give someone a miserable 2-hour experience. We're doing this because we want to make people happy. I would assume that most people are here because they want people to read your scripts and be entertained, and we're making entertainment. We're trying to make people happy, or perhaps, you know, different scripts have different goals. You're not always trying to give somebody a laugh a minute, but like, you're trying to, there is a certain satisfaction or happiness that comes from reading something that is doing what it's setting out to do. So I forget where I started with this, but yeah, absolutely. You got to find what's working and help them. Not like, if there's something that you really liked, then make sure they don't get spooked and change it, because then that might cause other bigger problems. Somebody else like to weigh in? think we're getting some feedback from somebody's mic. Thank you. So yeah, this is not a good art to go into if you want applause. You're not going to get applause for a long time. And that's tough to sort of accept sometimes, and that is a tough thing to grapple with if you are really motivated by praise or by accomplishing your goal and getting something right. But this is sort of like, it's weird because screenwriting is sort of like playing the violin. It's actually like some instruments you can pick up and make a coherent sound with right away, like playing the piano. Sort of like stage play, like doing plays is like playing the piano, because anyone can come up and just start pressing keys and make the notes, and like you can do a stage show with no tech, with minimal costumes. You don't need almost anything. Anyone can just get up and do a stage play, and the quality of it is going to be determined by how well you're actually, pressing those notes together. Whereas screenwriting is more like playing the violin, and it actually takes a not insubstantial amount of work to get it to make a clear sound. Does this make sense? So, to get it to even sound like music takes extra work.
No wonder. That explains a lot. But that makes me feel a lot better, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's many times you will only get negative notes for the first, year or more of doing this. Maybe you'll get like thrown a bone here and there. But it's like playing the violin. You have to actually work at getting a good sound from the bow. Like, it's not like anyone can just go up and start writing stuff and have it immediately click as, oh, this is a well-written screenplay. This is a screenplay at all. Like, if you're writing it wrong, we might be like, this is not how you write a script. It just doesn't. It's not making the right sound from the bow. So I hope that instrument metaphor makes sense. Yeah, try to respect and understand that it takes people a long time to. It can take certain people a long time. Everyone has a different process. It can take people a while before they can even write a page or write a scene. Like, writing one good scene is pretty hard when you're getting started. I mean, by the time that you have internalized many of these processes, you will be writing many good scenes in every movie, and that's like 40 scenes per movie. You'll have written hundreds of scenes, but for a while it takes some people an adjustment period to moving into this type of writing where we have like these very distinct scenes. It's not like novel writing. Novels don't work scenes in the same way. In novels, it feels sometimes a little more like we're floating loose until we like settle into a scene, whereas a script is scene, end. So yeah, try to understand where the person you're giving feedback to is. That doesn't mean you need to hold anything back, but it does mean the way that you phrase that and phrase your feedback and the things that you tell them to focus on should take that into account. If they are just starting at this and like every scene is terrible, then try to focus on something they can fix. Say something, if we say something like, this character's storyline was not working as well. If you took that out, that might improve the movie. Or you don't have to prescribe them how to fix it like that. You could just say, like, this character's story was a problem. You don't have to lead with, this whole thing is a mess. It may not be as helpful if you lead with, this whole thing is a mess. Any other comments or questions about giving and receiving feedback? What should your response
I think
be?
I come off like
Go ahead.
really terse when I give feedback. I think I come off really terse. I'll read a page and I'll just say, well, you have all these sequences where we show the outside and then we get out of the car and we walk in, and then there's nothing here. It's kind of boring, and it's I think I just come off very terse, and that's a personal problem to work on.
Yeah, let me give you a suggestion. Instead of writing out, this was boring, can you phrase it as a question? What was the narrative point of this moment? See what I mean? Phrase it as a question and give it the writer something to chew on and think about, rather than making a declaration. Does that sound like it would work?
Yeah, that sounds right. It's interactive. It's asking them, what can you do to change this, instead of just take a pair of scissors to it, bud.
Yeah, exactly. I love how my friend Max Perry gives feedback. Max was our guest. He's a pro writer who wrote for the Netflix, co-created and wrote the Netflix show The Spy with Sacha Baron Cohen. He co-taught our historical writing class earlier. I love how he gives feedback, and he's like so diplomatic and so like gentle with it. He'll say things like, I wonder if we can think of, or I wonder if we can brainstorm some ways to expand this. Or I wonder how you can, like, he'll phrase it so much, and, like, it feels very collaborative when he gives it. He's not saying, like, that wasn't
That's
working.
what I do. That's what I do. I'm so sensitive. I think that's why. I think that we give the feedback in the way that, so when people are harsh, it's also because they prefer brevity. You know, like
Right.
I have friends that are that way. Like they just tell it like it is because that's how they want to be talked to. So it's we kind of give feedback a little bit the way we want to hear it too.
That's a good point. I hadn't even really articulated it like that before. But yeah, but you can, in the feedback that you get from somebody, maybe you can tell, like, this is how they will prefer to hear it as well. And this is why it's good to talk with your group members early on to say, like, hash those things out and not be totally caught off guard by, you know, somebody's like, I have an anxiety disorder. Can you, when you write my notes, please don't tell me that you hate. Like, that's a pet peeve of mine when somebody uses the word hate in notes. I'm gonna ban that. I'm not banning much. I don't ban almost anything at Scriptcamp, but just don't use the word hate. I hated this. I hated that. Just because, to me, saying you hated something in a script is sort of like somebody spends all night cooking for you and then you take a bite of their dish and you spit it into the trash. To me, that's what that feels like. Even if you did hate it, I don't care. Like, it's irrelevant if you really did or really didn't, whatever that even means. But phrase it as a question. Remember, this is a collaboration between you and the writer. This isn't a movie critic's review. Does that make sense? Let me write that down. I think that might be one of the most key elements of giving and receiving feedback. Golden rule. This is like the third golden rule I've said. This is another golden rule. Let me line them all up so they're actually in the same spot. Where's the other one? Okay, so first golden rule, focus on how it made you feel rather than calling things out as good or bad. Here's another one. Oh, did I forget it because I was so busy trying to find the other? What was I just talking about? Oh, it was so good. What was I just talking about? Someone help me.
Oh, not use hate.
Thank you.
What was the other
yes,
thing?
I was talking about hate. So how did I get there? Don't say you hate things, because remember that you are... Oh, it's a that's right. Okay. This is... Thank you. This is a collaboration between you and the writer, not a movie critic review. Any questions on that? Do these golden rules make sense to everybody? Let's just put these as number 1 and number 2. And I'm going to link these in the chat as well.
Connor, Nacho sent me the Verve coverage guideline. It's like a 19-page guide on how to give feedback.
Yeah.
And I found
that's a great one.
Pretty helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, let's we'll link that in the chat, and that is going to be a guide that's used by the Verve agency to look at giving coverage to scripts, and it includes a lot of really, really thorough breakdowns of the things to look at and the order to read them in. From about page 7 to the end is where you should look at there. If somebody can post it in the chat, that would be great. If not, I can do it myself by the end of class. There it is. Thanks, Nacho. So yeah, let's take a look at that now, actually. So go ahead and download that and open it up. And let's take a look. So how do I get it on Firefox? 1 second. Okay, so this is all really good stuff to read and have in mind when you are giving people feedback, because this is breaking down coverage in terms of this like grid system that they use, and a lot of coverage services will use a kind of scoring grid. You definitely don't have to do that, like this sort of chart of information about the material, you don't have to write all that out. Like, this is not official coverage that you're doing. You're just giving a sort of overall assessment. But when you buy coverage, you'll often get a full breakdown like this that is going to include, the elements attached, the genre, the locale setting, period, budget, number of pages, the date that it came out, the draft that it is, all these things. So don't worry about this. We're really going to focus on, in this document, is going to be, I think it's page 7. Yeah, page 7 is evaluating a screenplay. This would be 7 of the document itself, not of the PDF. On the PDF, this is page 9. Okay, so this is where it's going to give you things to look for in every single category. We start with premise. That's the core concept of the story. If that's not working, you're in serious trouble. What should you do if your basic premise isn't working, do you think?
I mean, I think that comes back to the log line, right? You just go back to the log line and say, what is this movie about? Did I write the script that the log line said I should write? One of my very first scripts, I actually didn't do that. I wrote a log line that told one story. I ended up with a screenplay that didn't follow it. And then, I scrapped the project because it wasn't very good anyway. But if I were to improve the project, the first thing to do is to go back to that log line and see if I can reimagine it back in that structure.
Yeah, great way of putting that. That happens all the time, is that somebody will write a script that differs or deviates so much from their logline that it's no longer even recognizable as that's supposed to be the story you just described. So if the premise isn't working, title, logline, and comps are the first thing to go back to. We need to make sure that the core concept is as compelling as possible, that it's sort of as universal as possible. It's exploring its premise to its full potential is a question we often ask. What does this idea kind of mean? Fulfilling the premise to its full potential. Does somebody feel confident that they can articulately summarize what this means and how to address this?
I can try.
Go ahead.
Okay, it has something to do with exploring you just said that, exploring the premise to its full potential. So I don't know. I know what I'm thinking. I just don't know how to articulate it.
Okay, maybe I'll give you a little a boost. So how do we identify what is the potential of a script? Like, what promises is it making?
You deliver the expectation of the genre would be a basic one, maybe.
Yeah, great expectation of the genre. So expectation in terms of, you mean emotional experience?
Yeah.
Right.
The payoff, then, yeah.
So let's say emotional expectations of the genre. You should be able to boil that down to just a pretty, it should not be a secret what emotion you are attempting to access with your story. The whole idea behind storytelling is that we are deliberately inflicting certain emotions on us in a controlled and safe way. Something exciting or dangerous, perhaps, if we want to thrill, because we know it's not really real. It's just a story. So we get that. The appeal is that we're looking for something suspenseful and exciting, and it makes me feel on the edge of my seat for a thriller. The emotional expectation of your genre should be crystal clear to you, and that's how your comps are really going to factor in. You're going to be able to sort of get an assessment of the promises the script is making from the title, genre, and comps. That's going to be the first thing to look at, because we have to ask yourself, what promises is your story making? Promises are these, the fulfillment of them is really key to how storytelling works. Meaning that the audience should be getting the thing they signed up for in a better or different way than they asked for it. This is the Oreo pizza thing, where you order pizza, the pizza guy shows up and says, sorry, we're out of pizza, everyone's sad, and he opens the box and there's an Oreo pizza inside. That's the sort of principle that we're talking about, where you have to fulfill the expectations in a way that people never thought you would. So you have to be able to identify what promises the script is actually making. So if we have a script with a title that suggests that something is going to happen, you think a lot of people were annoyed by this movie, It Comes at Night. Why do you think that is? Anybody see this? Nobody saw It Comes at Night. Okay. The point is that it's sort of suggested in the marketing, and the title to some extent also sort of suggests there's kind of like a monster in the movie. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic drama. There's not really a monster. Nothing really comes at night. The title is sort of, I guess, like a metaphor. It comes at night being perhaps danger or distrust or like the negative elements of the human experience or something like that. I'm not 100% sure exactly it was a long time ago when I saw it, but I remember reading anecdotes of the credits would roll and somebody in the theater, I read one anecdote stood up and was like, it never came at night. So the title gives you a certain promise right off the bat. If the movie is called Killer Clowns and there's only a killer clown in the movie for 8 minutes, you're not fulfilling one of your main promises and you're not exploring the premise to its full potential. You should be able to break down what the premise is to just a sentence or two. That's why we spend so long on the log line. But you're making sure that you deliver on the thrills that you have suggested will be there. Any questions on fulfilling the potential of a premise? Okay, let's keep looking through this coverage guide. We'll look at some other things to pay attention to. Actually, let me check my slideshow and just make sure there's nothing else that I wanted to get to. We could talk about how do you know when it's done. I think we'll talk about that at the end. Yeah, let's look at a few other coverage guide things first, and then we will discuss how do we know when we're done with this. The answer is more nebulous than you think. Okay, so let's look at some other things. How about originality? How important is originality? In Scriptcamp, I say almost not at all. I don't really like when people write fan fiction. Like, it's hard to assess fan fiction because it has different goals than our goals for the most part. You can't include fan fiction in your portfolio. Nobody will really read it. Or, like, the closest you can get to this is writing spec episodes of existing TV shows, which are still used by still read by some showrunners and still used to enter fellowships and contests sometimes. You can have those if you're looking to go into TV writing, but for the most part, you shouldn't be writing fan fiction. You should just write something original that is inspired by the thing that you want to write the fan fiction of. But beyond that, originality is less important than learning how to write a functional story. So I wouldn't harp on originality too hard in your assessments here. You can include a note on it and say like, oh, this is a premise I've never seen before, or this is a well-executed version of this story idea. But we're working more on the skills involved than we are trying to break any molds or bust any boundaries. For the most part, you're trying to assess. You're like a mechanic. We're trying to fix up the machine. We're not trying to make a brilliant new machine. Structure. This is one of the most important elements of this assessment. And you can get a good little breakdown of it here that is pretty much the same stuff that we talk about because 3-act structure is 3-act structure. And no matter which book that you read it in or what website you get the templates from, it's all going to kind of come out in the wash pretty much the same. So Act 1 is our main character's sort of pre-existing life that takes us up to an inciting incident, which is something that happens that unveils a certain threshold or doorway to them that they then struggle to push their way through, but until the room that they're in gets hotter and hotter until they must eventually go through that threshold into the room on the other side, which is scary and dangerous and upside down and different. Act 2 is where they have changed their life in some kind of way, made some kind of major decision to try to get what they want, to try to address their need, or to try to accomplish their goal. And Act 2 is where the movie really happens. So Act 2, we say, is the movie. Act 2 is the movie, meaning this is where the most essential stuff that will be in your trailer or poster will be taking place. Your main promises are going to be fulfilled in Act 2. So look at the logline, and if that describes what's happening in Act 2, you can tell that you're pretty much in the right territory. So Act 2 is going to take us up to the midpoint. Some people call the section after the midpoint Act 2B. I don't split them into two. I don't split it in half myself. The whole thing's Act 2. Act 2 is just the longest act of all. In 3-act structure, Act 2 is the majority of the work. Somebody mentioned 30, 60, 30 before, so if you're doing that, then 60 is twice as long as either of the other two acts. So it's going to take us to the midpoint, which is often some kind of big elevation of stakes. Perhaps it's some kind of new revelation. Perhaps the consequences of the fun and games come to fruition, or perhaps any number of things, really. Things shift. Things change in some kind of way that deepens the stakes. That's all you really need to know for midpoint, but then we're moving up to the all is lost moment where it seems like where your hero has either failed at their goal or seems as if they are on the verge of failing at their goal. They are wallowing in the despair of what we call the pit of despair, or the dark night of the soul, and then is we break into Act 3 with some kind of resurgence or reconciliation or breakthrough, or essentially the lesson of the movie or the journey of the movie culminates in something that is going to push us towards this finale and give your main character a second wind and one more chance to succeed. At which point we clash with the main villain in a finale that is befitting your genre. So we should be making sure the finale, especially, is going to deliver on the emotional experience that you've promised. It should be the most blank event that has occurred in the entire story so far. The scariest, the funniest, the most dramatic. The climax needs to actually feel like it's the culmination of a bunch of increasingly difficult obstacles that have all added up to this. So if you find the finale feels like this was just as hard as everything else, that's a big problem. Make sense? So Act 3 is going to take us up to the final battle, that big confrontation. Your hero either succeeds or fails at their goal, or maybe sometimes there's this ambiguous ending where it's like they don't do either one. They abandon their goal, perhaps, maybe, or they pick a different goal, or they realize their goal doesn't matter anymore, or it's unclear if they accomplished it or not. We have a whole class of endings that breaks down the many different nuances of these different sort of approaches, but the point is, finale, your hero usually either wins or loses, and then you have, after the climax, just try to wrap up within a couple scenes. It's hard to maintain momentum after the climax has occurred and keep us invested and interested. So, like, within, I don't know, 3 scenes, can you kind of wrap it up? If it's more than that, like, no one's going to be marking you points. But this is the moment when we start to check our watches and everyone starts to, pick up their popcorn scraps off the floor. And we're like, okay, the movie's done now, right? Movie's done. So, pull the curtain. Anyway. So that's some of the major structure stuff. If you're not super clear on structure, we have many classes that we've done on this, and we have Writer's Lab if you want to come and ask about more specific questions or topics. That's later today from 2 to 4. From 4 to 6. There's many resources on structure, and we have many recorded classes that go very deep into this. It's imperative that you understand this like the back of your hand. It's very difficult to give good feedback without it. Okay. So any questions on what we talked about so far? So assessing structure or perhaps premise or originality?
I think I'm finally starting to get it.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, keep learning, keep through repetition. That's where it's like I mentioned, it's like learning an instrument sort of. The doing the scales is there because it helps you sort of understand how to play better. Like just by doing it again and again, you will build that muscle memory that allows you to make the connections that will result in a better story. Okay, if there's no more questions, let's we're gonna just look at 1 or 2 more things on here, then we'll talk what to do when it's done, and then we will see if we have a class, I suppose. If not, this was just a long video a recorded demonstration of the just the overview of the course, and we, even if we aren't running this class, we will run it again at some point. So this is the sort of stuff to expect, and this is just how it works and what to look for. Okay, so what else do I want to look at on this coverage guide? Pacing, conflict, characters, dialogue, writing ability. That's probably a more general thing that's not going to be as easily broken down. Okay, so as of all of these, I want to look at, let's talk writing ability just a little bit. It's got to be formatted correctly. There's not options of how to format a script. There's only one way. There's one way to do this, and although there's variation of certain things, like how do you format a montage? No one really cares that much. How do you format a flashback? Nobody, there are different approaches to doing some things on the page. Some stuff is just non-negotiable. You gotta have the right font. You gotta have the right spacing. You gotta have the right margins. You gotta, by just using screenwriting software, you will avoid a lot of these problems. Try to not make it feel like it's crammed in, or like if people have clearly adjusted a bunch of the settings on the page to make it shorter or longer, give them a slap on the wrist for that, because that is not what we're supposed to do. The sort of just English class essentials of proper grammar, proper sentence structure. Does this person clearly know how to write? Like that will all become sort of overall clear to you through the assessment of one script. You don't really have to comment too much on that, but you might want to if it is significantly presenting an issue. If you say, for instance, there's typos on every page, there's tons of grammar issues, It doesn't, like, if you are getting the sense that the writer just doesn't have a strong grasp of the English language, you don't have to include that in your assessment, but you might just want to point out where some of those problems are. You don't have to necessarily be an A+ English student to do this, but it helps, and you're competing with a bunch of people who are, is how I will phrase it. You are going directly up against people who are obsessively fastidious about their writing skills. I can't imagine how it would help you to not be. So you should learn about parts of speech and about elements of style and what makes really clear, crisp prose as much as you can. And the best way to learn that is just by reading a lot. You don't have to do anything annoying. You just have to read a lot of scripts. And also read other stuff too. Read widely. Read fiction, nonfiction, magazines, articles, news, everything. So just by reading a lot, you will become a better writer. If there are consistent problems in just the English class essentials of your script, you will come off as an amateur. The last thing I'll probably look at here is dialogue. So we have a whole class on dialogue that I think is there one left? No, Nacho did 2 parts of that. Didn't you do both parts of it, or is part 2 next week?
No, that was already this week.
It's already done. Okay. So, yeah, we have recordings of many of our previous dialogue classes if you want more specific exercises to work on or things to look for there. But basically, we need to make sure that the characters feel distinct on the page. It doesn't feel like everyone is just the same person. We want to make sure that the lines are concise and to the point, and we aren't going on big bricks of speeches that much, usually. I mean, in some genres, you get more room for that sort of thing. In courtroom dramas, you get quite a lot of big speeches. In a Western drama, characters often pontificate to great length using much more sort of erudite vocabulary. But in a lot of stuff, you just want to make sure the lines are accomplishing the roles they need to. If we're able to cover up the speakers' names and tell who's saying what, that is a sign that the characters are quite distinct. We want to avoid too much exposition in dialogue, so characters saying things that they already know or explaining things to each other that they should already be aware of. As you know, doctor, that is the tumor is on the lower left quadrant of the liver in this section that, as you know, is called the lower left liver. Like, whatever it is. You don't want people explaining things that the other person already knows. You want to avoid feeling like you're spoon-feeding the audience the information that they have to have. You want to avoid getting too much exposition in terms of media. So over the radio broadcasts, on TV, on the internet, you don't want to just have them Google the problem right away, usually. Dialogue should advance the story and be relevant and interesting and use great voice and be memorable and quotable. And, there's many things that we can assess for. Basically, look for where it's superfluous, cliche, or unnecessary, and those are going to be the biggest things to read for. Okay, any questions about assessing dialogue? I know we're in our last few minutes, and I do want to talk about what to do next. Okay, no questions. Let's keep going. Or wait, actually, let me check the chat. Yeah. Okay, so what to do? Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about the log line.
Okay.
Do you want me to wait until like tomorrow maybe? Or later today?
The log line for your project that you're rewriting?
No, just general questions about log lines.
Sure, go ahead.
I can wait. Okay, because I have some log lines, right? But what the problem with some of these log lines, I think, is like, what's the connection between the first part of the log line and the second part? Mm-hmm. Because I know it connects to me because I know the story, but so how do I make it connect to everyone else?
It sounds like you just need a clear sense of cause and effect. If the first thing can be described as this happens, so then this thing happens, then that's the right kind of area to be thinking in. It shouldn't be this thing happens and this thing happens. It should just, the first thing that you mentioned should be the logical inciting incident for the second thing. I'm not 100% sure of a better way to explain it than that, but like it needs to feel like this is it needs to feel like it's one story, not like it's two stories. So just try to emphasize how the first thing is causing the second thing to happen, I suppose. I mean, I if you want to come to lab today, I can give you more specific help in that, though.
Helps. Cause and effect. That helps. Just that alone.
Oh, yeah. Great. Okay. But yeah, feel free to come to any labs if you would like additional one-on-one feedback on that. But that's, yeah, my general guidance would be make sure that clause 1 seems like the cause of the effect in clause 2.
Thank
Clause
you.
and cause in the same sentence. That was a tongue twister. Okay, so let's look at how do you know when it's done? There's not one answer to this. You have to just kind of assess on your own when you feel that it's finished. When you've addressed every note, you just keep sending it out for more reads. I mean, you might want to save. You may not want to send to all your friends and family or readers in your group at once. You might want to sort of layer it so that you can get more feedback because you don't want to send a script to somebody for feedback more than once. Unless they're like your best friend or a member of your group, maybe something like that. But often it's too much to ask to expect somebody to read multiple drafts. So you might want to save some people so that you can get a few more reads out of it, and just keep doing that until you're not getting more notes that you think will help the project anymore. You just have to do that and determine to the best of your ability, is this as good as I can kind of make it? The answer will rarely be, yes, this is great. And you'll almost always feel as if, oh, I could change more. I mean, even Aaron Sorkin, probably the most famous screenwriter in the world at this point, still talks about how he feels the need to go back and revise his draft of The Social Network. And that script won an Oscar. So, like, if you feel the same sort of inclinations, then you're in good company. You're probably in the right place. We're very, neurotic people. Writers are famously always trying to make these adjustments and never feeling like it's done or it's finished. But at a certain point, you just have to cast it off and let it go, or at least understand that you're going to put it in a drawer for a while and maybe come back to it later. So give it 3 to 5 drafts. If you're doing more than 6 or 7 and you're not being paid for it, you probably should stop. And at a certain point, just cut your losses, or don't think of it as losses. Think of every script as a stepping stone and as a learning experience. And you are going to the gym. It's not like you need to make every rep of every time you go to the gym and you lift the weights. It's not like you have to go to the Olympics. You're going to the gym because it is a process of incrementally getting better at this. So, I realize that's kind of a non-answer. It's kind of a cop-out. How do you know when it's done? Well, you don't really. But, give it 3 to 5 solid drafts, solid tries. At least, 3 is a good number. If you're early on in your career, maybe just 2 is fine. And you don't really need to revise at all if you feel that you would just be more excited by moving on to a new thing. You will learn more from writing more things and finishing them than you will by fiddling with something forever. Questions on how we know when it's done?
I mean, I think that in certain ways it's about thinking about what the ceiling on the project is. Like, how good can this even be, right? Because, once you have something, you look at it and you're like, I think if I give this 1 or 2 good rewrites, this is great. Well, then give it the rewrites. If you look at it and you're like, well, how good can this be? Okay. Maybe it isn't. Maybe you can cut your losses and move on to the next one. I think that sort of assessment is important to sort of just look at it and figure out what you have there.
Yeah, that's a good point. If your honest determination is, even if I do a great job on the rewrites, will this be that great? Not really. Then probably move on and just find something else exciting. Your goal is to become a generator of unlimited ideas. It's not to be a person who's written one awesome script. You must be able to write endless amounts of awesome scripts. Okay, we are in our last couple minutes here, so I will, let's look at what to do for next time, and do we have a class? So do we want to see who's ready to submit on this form, or how many students do we have in the class? Let me see, 1, 2, 3, we have 4. Do we have at least enough for our class? Let's find out. Not just says, can you tell everyone to vote in the poll and to fill out this sign-up form? Do we have that in the chat? There it is. So, you can vote in this poll. Just click the little numbers. And if you're watching a stream, you can't see this. This is on Discord. But so on our Discord chat, we're trying to figure out if we have enough students here. So go ahead and fill that out. Let's see. We have a not sure. So is there maybe does our not sure have any questions that might be able to push that into a sure?
I'm a not sure right now because I'm debating on whether to get coverage from you, specifically because I've had this read so many times that I think I'm kind of ready to put it to rest, but just want to one more thorough look at it.
Okay.
So I'm just debating on that. And then the other script I have is like, there's so many problems with it. I don't want, I know what I already know what so many problems are that it's not ready for feedback.
I see. Makes sense. Okay, well, hopefully we can...
But I will know for sure tomorrow. I just want to
Yeah.
first class of the pilot, so I hate to be the...
That's okay.
You know.
No, you should try the pilot class, and then you can decide then, and then we'll sort of have a better idea. Okay, so it seems to me, Nacho, we probably don't have enough, but that is okay by me. I mean, that just means that this is a preview for future rewrite classes.
Oreo Pizza Bootcamp.
Oreo Pizza Bootcamp. Okay, so step 1, you need a nice base of frosting. Or I assume it doesn't have sauce. I mean, or the sauce is the frosting, more or less, right?
Can I ask everyone, are there some other, I don't know, classes or genres or stuff that you're interested in?
Sure.
I think we have a form where you can just, post in the chat or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything that you guys are interested in, because we're kind of deciding, I guess, what would be this slot, this time frame of around noon on Saturdays.
I want to do sci-fi boot camp, but if everybody wants to do something else, then we're trying to please the people. Customer's always right. Amanda says fantasy. I have been thinking about a fantasy course. Yeah. Anyone else?
I would even do like practice short storytelling, just like practicing like that really, I don't know, basic skill of where you can do it almost in a couple hour setting where you're just practicing the plot structure and building that muscle, because writing a whole, even a half-hour script takes a long time, but I feel like there's smaller, even shorter stories to practice with. I don't know what that would look like, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you for that. And just in terms of short story, I have been thinking of doing a short story writing, because I've mostly been writing novels and prose for the past year, so I've written a bunch of short stories and might actually just do a camp in one of those at one point too. Thanks for the suggestion. So yeah, feel free to fill out our go to the suggestion box channel and give us more ideas. It seems to me like, well, I guess we'll know tomorrow perhaps, but it sounds like this session of bootcamp won't be going at the moment. But as soon as we just need, it's not a lot, we just need 3 people. So in the future, I think that we will be doing more of these for sure. And if you have friends that you want to refer, just bring in 1 or 2 friends, and then we can run the whole class. It's just hard to do if there is not enough people to give the feedback. So that's okay though. We'll figure it out for sure in coming up soon. Let's look at what is coming up next at Scriptcamp. We have lab today, and well, yeah, I guess don't worry about this homework if you're not going to be in the class. We have do I have an upcoming class slide? Maybe not. I guess I don't. That's okay. So we have lab today at 4 o'clock, so come with up to 5 pages of material or questions about any topics you want to hear about. And we have pilot tomorrow from 11 a.m. Pacific time to 1 p.m. And then anything else to announce, Nacho?
Yeah, and also if anyone needs extra help, you can get a consultation. It's for members, it's a great rate. It's like $49 per script. We have some new, so we have a sketch comedy group tomorrow, comedy pilot writers group meeting on Mondays, and we have a horror writers club meeting. It's going to be on Tuesdays.
Tuesdays, right? Yeah.
What time is the sketch comedy?
It's tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Eastern. Mm-hmm.
And there's Nacho just put the links to all of these in the chat, so if you're interested in one, just click the interested bell and it'll give you a notification before the class starts.
And so everyone who's new to, maybe just signed up recently, did membership, a huge resource the writers lab, which is going to be later today, and that's like, you know, you can bring a log line, you can bring outline, or you know, pages from your script. Incredibly valuable like resource. I've had projects that I was struggling for months to kind of figure out, you know, some important part of the story or figuring out the outline, and Conor was able to kind of like just see the problem, and in like 2 minutes he's like, okay, this is your midpoint, this is it, bam. And you know, he's fast because he has to write so many, you know, he's written so many stories, so he kind of sees like way to cut to like how to fix story problems really quickly. So it's a great, I highly recommend everybody to drop by if you have unlimited membership.
Yeah, come by. That'll be at 4 o'clock. We'd be glad to see you guys there. Okay, we're going to wrap this class for now, so thanks so much for coming. Hopefully, even if the class is not going to be starting now, excuse me, at least you have you have learned some important things, and you have been sort of put on the path to organizing rewrites and to just thinking about them in a more structured, meticulous way. So thanks for coming. We'll see you guys at an upcoming Scriptcamp event. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much.